So welcome everybody to the July meeting of North End Neighborhood Council. I apologize for last month. We had a snafu with the Zoom connection. So those people who signed in to watch by Zoom were in a different meeting than the meeting that was here. But we did record it and we did post it on our, there's a link on the website that goes into a YouTube channel where you can see the actual meeting. So I apologize for that problem last month. With respect to announcements, I think I mentioned last month, we did have a resignation from the board. So we are interested in getting some additional board members. Anybody who's interested in joining the board, just reach out to any existing board member who could give you an update on what's entailed, or reach out to the email admin@nenc.org, and that comes through to us. So anybody who's interested, we have a board meeting coming up next Monday. So if you were interested and wanted to see what was involved, you could come and observe the board in action. I'm going to hold over the approval of the minutes, and I'm going to hold over the treasurer's report to next meeting. And with respect to our standard liaison reports, I don't see the police, and they didn't give me an indication that they were not going to be here. So I'm not quite sure what happened there. John, do you want to address stuff apart from this, or should we just include that in your presentation? Okay. So, and Christina, I see that you're not, I'm going to take you off. Try and take you off. I think we can hear you, Christina. If you want to give us your report.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. We can hear you.
Wonderful. Good evening, everybody. I just have a couple of things I wanted to share tonight. First, I wanted to make sure that you are all aware that the applications for Grit City Trees for their 2024 season have opened. Those applications will be open through September 2nd. And if you're approved, you get a free tree and some of the supporting materials to help that tree. And we do encourage neighbors to work together on their applications and submit as a group, or individuals can submit by themselves as well. I also wanted to flag that applications are now being accepted for the new Urban Design Board positions. There are 5 positions that are available to residents of District 1, although some of those do require professional experience in design or development. And the Urban Design Review Board will be helping to provide input on urban design matters and urban design project review permits. And you can apply for those positions on cityoftacoma.org/CBC applications. And then last, I want to stress something that I suspect Deputy Mayor Hines will also stress in his remarks. But as 4th of July is coming up, please do remember that fireworks are illegal in the city of Tacoma, and you can draw a $515 fine if you set them off here. So instead of setting off fireworks, please come and join the city down at the Summer Blast event on Ruston Way and the Dune Peninsula, and we're going to have a great fireworks show down there. So please be safe on 4th of July, and please don't set off those fireworks. Thank you, Peter.
So I have one question before we let you go, Christina. So on the Urban Design Board, the message that was sent out today said that they wanted candidates from districts 3, 4, and 5. Seeing as we're districts 1 and 2, I wondered why we are being ignored. Is there some reason for that?
There are some positions that are open for those districts only. I can find out more information about those ones specifically, but the other 5 positions are open to 2 residents in District 1 and 2. And again, there are some of those professional requirements for a couple of the positions as well. But I'll find out more information for you, Peter, and get back to you.
Okay, and I'm probably will get questions on the city issues to John and Sarah when they come and give up. So unless there's anything else specific, I'll put you back on mute. Try and put you back on mute. You're muted. And invite John and Sarah. Are you going to come up and do a tag team or one at a time, or however you want to do it?
Good evening, everyone. Tacoma City Council Member Sarah Rumbaugh, District 2. It's nice to be here tonight, even on a nice sunny summer day. We show up when we're supposed to be here. I'm here with Deputy Mayor John Hines. He's Deputy Mayor because he was chosen Deputy Mayor. So that's how he became Deputy Mayor. I'm going to talk about a few things, and I'm going to really let John talk about a lot of things because I'm going to let him talk about charter review and that stuff. And I'm going to talk about some different things. One of the things I wanted to mention was that we have a North Slope. I have a North Slope Historic District meeting I'll be at on August 22nd. So if you live in the North Slope area, I'll be at that meeting on August 22nd, and we'll be talking about an update on Lowell Elementary's construction and home in Tacoma and other things that might be on people's minds. Also, there'll be an update on the tide flats and what's happening with that, with the tide flat sub-area plan that should be coming sometime soon. I'm on the board for South Sound 911. So that message about fireworks, like I never really thought about it from the side of what it must be like to be one of those people who's answering 911 calls on the 4th of July. But it is extremely busy that day. And that means when we have fireworks that they can't actually get out to people who actually have an emergency. So that's another reason not to be lighting off fireworks, because it takes those calls come in as well as the calls for real emergencies where someone's having a heart attack or there's been a car accident. So I'm just putting that out for everyone to think about. And then one of the things I think is really interesting that I'm interested in is that Metro Parks had a pilot program with 5 schools to do poop stations. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but when your only open space is your school, a lot of people bring their dogs. And then what do dogs do? They poop. And so providing poop stations is a way to make sure that we keep our grass clean for kids and other people who use that area. And they put one out at Browns Point Elementary, which is part of District 2 out there in Northeast Tacoma, and it's been very successful. And so I've asked them to look at, could they do another pilot program? So that's something I'm following, and I'm hoping that's something that you might be interested in having at some of your schools here if you don't already have poop stations. So does anyone know if Lowell Elementary has poop stations? You don't think so? So yeah. And so that to me is something that I think is important, especially as we become a more dense populated area and people like their dogs. And we don't want to say you can't bring your dog. We want to make sure it's more friendly for everyone, right? All users. The last thing I wanted to bring up is that we have opened up our sustainability small grants again program, and this round of funding is now open for applicants until the closing date on September 30th. And this grant program offers local nonprofits and community organizations the opportunity to apply for up to $5,000 to support local environmental and sustainability programs, events, or projects within Tacoma. These projects align with the key aspects from Tacoma's 2030 Climate Action Plan and contributes to the enhancement of our 3 utilities. And so if you have an idea for a project, I talked to someone, Ron, who is a member of one of the churches, and they wanted to put in boxes to put food up for free, food for free. And so they had to do the boxes. In order to pay for that, they're going to apply for a grant. So I just wanted to have you thinking outside the box. If there's an organization you're part of and you're interested in doing something like that, I'd love to help you. If you need any information, please reach out to me. I can try to put you with the right staff person to get you more information. All right. Guess what, John? You get to talk about all the difficult things today. Right.
Okay. Let me get on camera first. All right. All right, good evening, everyone. As Councilor Rumbaugh said, my name is John Hines. Pleasure to be here with all of you. I will also probably be talking a little bit with the Cushman-Adams substation reuse conversation. So I will try to keep my remarks here really quick to the point. Number one, the city is currently looking at the Charter Review Commission's recommendations for updating our city charter. Remember, the charter is like the constitution for the city of Tacoma. So it is the core foundational document. And every 10 years, we're required to review and suggest potential changes to it. So we had a charter review commission that suggested 24 potential amendments for the city council to consider. We've been talking about those for the last 2 months. We also have some council amendments that we're proposing at the same time. So tomorrow night, July 2nd, during our council meeting, we're gonna be having our public hearing on all of the amendments that have been proposed. Again, the city council will then take the public comment from the hearing and all everything we've heard along the way, and then we will decide which of the items will go forward to the ballot. In order to change the city's charter, it requires a vote of the people. So the city council cannot change it. Anything that is proposed or we put on the ballot has to pass by a vote of the people. So even if you have not had your voice heard yet or not weighed in yet, and even if you don't participate tomorrow, you will get to the final word in November, as it'll all go to the ballot. So that's a charter review. I also just referenced the budget. We are in a budget season right now. So the city's directors for different departments are putting together their budget proposals. That's going to the city manager. And then we will be further having council members weigh in with our budget priorities, and the final budget will be finished sometime in November, but there'll be plenty of time for the public to weigh in on where we should be spending our money in the next 2 years. So those are kind of two longer term items that I would just bring up to your attention. Number 3, fireworks. Yes, fireworks are legal in the city of Tacoma. They've been that way since 1993. It's been a long time. I remember when they were still legal in Tacoma, but they've been illegal for almost 30 years at this point in time. And so please consider not using fireworks, going and seeing the fireworks down on the waterfront. If you don't care about the fine and you don't care about people's animals, I'd also just encourage you to think about our veterans in our community, where it's a real challenge for PTSD sufferers with lots of loud explosions going off. So again, people are going to shoot off fireworks in Tacoma, but we just encourage you to maybe think twice before you do so. 2 other things I want to talk about today that are specific to me. First thing up is later this July, I'm going to be doing a walk across the city of Tacoma. So I'm going to be starting at Point Defiance and walking all the way to Browns Point over a 7-day period. I won't stay outside, but I'm going to walk through different parts of the city of Tacoma, really kind of just highlighting the importance of being out and being active in your community. I think we continue to really need to strive to get out and be amongst each other. Right now, I think a lot of our challenges we're seeing in our communities because people are not out talking to each other anymore. We're hiding behind screens, we're behind phones, we're yelling at people over the internet, and we're not out in community and talking to people. So that's the whole goal of the walk. Is I'm just going to start walking through, visiting businesses, and if you're interested in joining or being part of the walk, I'm happy to have you come along for part of it. It should be a lot of fun. And as part of that, on July 20th, I'll be doing my summer coffee chat. Well, Alexis is here. My summer coffee chat at Wheelock Library on July 20th at 10:30 a.m. So I'll be walking and landing at the Wheelock Library at 10:30 a.m. on July 20th. So if you're interested, that will be more information coming out. It'll be in my newsletter. Actually, Christina will probably say it's not in this newsletter, but I'll be sending out an email blast to give you more information about that here soon. And then finally, one other issue, and Councilor Rumbaugh has talked to me about this. She's very interested too. We have a council that's really hyper-focused on youth in our community, which is really important, right? We really want to make sure we're doing the best we can to support our youth. And I'm a public school teacher or a recovering high school history teacher, so youth are really important to me. But one thing I have been thinking a lot about is if you build things for the youngest in our community, you also need to build things for the most experienced people in our community. And since Councilmember Hunter has left our council, I have felt a lack of focus on seniors in the city of Tacoma. So something I'm picking back up from Councilmember Hunter is our Age-Friendly Cities Action Plan. I'm going to be doing some discussions about how we make our city more friendly for our senior population. So that will be commencing in July and then into August. In July, I'll be talking to people who helped put together the first Aging-Friendly City Action Plan, along with members of our committees, boards, and commissions who are above the age of 65 to talk about what we could do in our city to make it more friendly for seniors. And then we're looking right now at this fall doing a senior summit. So having a gathering for people who are seniors or senior adjacent to come in and talk about what we could do as a city to promote active and healthy living into the later years of your life here in the city. And so issues around our zoning code and housing, issues around transportation and transit, sidewalks. These are all things that impact the youngest in our community, but also impact our more veteran members of our community. And so we want to think about kind of both ends of the spectrum here. So that's something that will be coming. You'll be hearing more about that if you're an avid newsletter reader, as Peter is, sometime in the near future. But those are my highlights for today. And I'll take questions, and Councilmembers here, we can both take questions for a moment, but I'd really like to get us to the Cushman Adams substation update. Mr. Burns. It's not picking up in the room, but I don't know if it's, there you go. I'll repeat your question, Kit. Great question. Yes, that is part of my walk is to go through that part of the city of Tacoma. The Madison neighborhood is something I know very well. I grew up in that neighborhood, and one of my best friends owned a house that is now an apartment complex. His grandmother did. So I know the neighborhood pretty well. I'm planning to walk through and really try to highlight some of the gaps in infrastructure we have, especially around sidewalks. That's one of the key reasons. And again, I would say one of the reasons we're walking is one clear way you know a neighborhood is safe. You see people out walking around, right? If you go to a neighborhood and no one's outside walking around, there's lots of questions about why. And so one of the reasons is sidewalks, some of it's perceptions of safety. So that is a neighborhood I'm going to, Kit. And if you'd like to join, oh, sorry, Tanya, I saw your question. Kit Burns asked me if on my walk, I was gonna go to the Madison neighborhood down by the Tacoma Mall. And the answer is yes. Boom. All right. I encourage anybody who'd like to come along to join. Yeah.
Having heard that the Rust
Yes. I mean, that's a great question, Peter. I don't know. I mean, it's a private property and they've hired and the developer, somebody's bought it. So it's something for me to think about. We would like to see more development in other parts of our city too. I would agree. So, and I think I saw some questions. Peter asked if the Rush development looks at developing the site, which is now the Key Bank building, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yes. Could we ask that they also redevelop a property in the McKinley neighborhood district, which I said that we have limited control over what people can do with private property if they do it within the zoning code, right? So it's zoned for high capacity and density. So I don't know what we could do to leverage them into building someplace else, but we would like to see development in other places. And then Tanya Lee asked about who is speaking. I'm interested in the senior summit. We will get more information out. If you're a newsletter subscriber, you will get to find out very soon more about the senior summit and ways to plug in. Oh, more. Yes, there is a hotline to report. Oh, yes. The speaker asked if there is a way to report fireworks that we're seeing in the community. The answer is yes, there is a hotline you can call in. It's not the non-emergency number, but if you go to the city's website and you search for fireworks, it'll take you to a web page that has a link to file a report and a number to call. The question is, will anybody show up and enforce the fireworks being used illegally? So let's just clarify two things. In order for a police officer to issue a citation, they have to actively see you lighting the fireworks off. So that's a critical component of it. The second part is there are going to be lots of fireworks here in the city of Tacoma, so they're going to be stretched pretty thin. And if they are reporting and responding, it'll often be likely that somebody set someone else's house or yard on fire. So please call in. They will look. Oh, and Christina's posted here right now. 253-287-4455. So please report it. So it helps us understand where we are. If the police department has time, they are out patrolling in the neighborhoods, but I would just caveat that they got to see somebody do it. And often they're spend a lot of their time dealing with a lot of fires that are set. So yes, I don't know. Yes. Okay, Jody. Yes. Mm-hmm. Great question. So the question was, there's a lot of trash in the median on North Union. What do residents do in that situation? Number one, please report it to Tacoma First 311 with the location. So you go to click fix, put in illegal dumping on the right of way, click the location, and environmental services should be able to pick it up. If you're able to see the license plate number and record it, they can pursue that afterwards, right? And the change in the city's litter code, which increased the fines and penalties, if they're able to establish that that person did it, it can be, it doesn't need to, it could be issued from the municipal court to address that. So, but yes, please, any information you can provide will be helpful in that, but click fix is the way to go. And actually we're responding really quickly to illegal dumping in the right of way. We clean it up pretty fast if it's reported, Tidy up? Yes. The question was, did we actually raise the penalty? Yes, it did. We raised the penalty. That was, Christina's not here. She's in the ether somewhere. That was at the end of this last year. We changed, no, earlier this year. So penalties going higher based on the amount of dumping and trying to really get after some of the people who are doing the large scale dumping on our public properties. Great. Okay. Councilmember Rumbaugh, you got off without taking all the tough questions. No, thank you all. I'll be here for a few more minutes before I have to go take my son to a soccer game. But as you know, all know how to get a hold of me. Please email me or I'm happy to follow up. Thanks.
Okay. Now let's make sure that we do this correctly. So we have two of our favorite people presenting tonight, John and Annika, have been here several times before, and they're going to give us an update on the, let me find how I do this, share screen. Please. So John Gaines, Annika Olson. So John's going to go first. So it's.
Thank you.
That's the camera, and then it goes.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. July meetings are always fun. It's always hard to get a lot of attendance, but happy that you're all here. My name is John, Community Relations Manager with Tacoma Public Utilities. I'm here with Annika Olson, Program Planner with our Neighborhood Planning Department. I want to just quickly, before I jump into some of the Cushman substation. Thank you. Just before I jump into some of the Cushman substation information, a couple quick updates. I was reminded from just a utility perspective. One, we're obviously Deputy Mayor Hines mentioned budget year. And so we will be out in the fall talking about budget. And I know we're recording this meeting, but I will also, when I come back in the fall with other utility representatives, I will incorporate some of the Cushman updates because I'm sure there will be more by September. And then the second update, we have a new chair of our Public Utility Board starting today. And so Public Utility Board members can serve up to 5 years and then their chair for 1 year. So Chair O'Laughlin, who worked for Environmental Services, retired, is now our new chair, who will also be out during the fall. So if you don't know him, you'll get to meet him. Now on to the fun stuff. So I'm here to talk about this. I think. Nope. Maybe let's try the mouse pad. There we go. Thank you. So we are here to provide a high-level overview of the Cushman Substation future use study. So this past weekend, we had 2 workshops at the Wheelock Library. Was anyone in attendance there? I know, Peter, you were there, Jody. So some of you were in attendance. And so the information I'm going to share, I'm going to present for the first portion of this presentation. It's not new information, but really want to just help level set before Annika joins me. So the agenda, we'll talk about the purpose of the future use study, the study area, and provide some context, and then share the study team, study timeline, and then important notes and things to remember. And then Annika will share some of the examples and then also just some of the things that we heard. This past week, we haven't met with our contractor yet. We meet with her meet with them for the first time, I believe, next Monday. And so these are just some of the high level updates, and then we'll talk about next steps. So the study aims to explore potential future uses for the Cushman and Adams substation buildings and its sites. It will incorporate input from citywide engagement and technical analysis. The reason for the citywide engagement, I know we've done some of the outreach in the past in 2018, but then given the pandemic obviously restarting, and council and the pub wanted us to do a citywide outreach. And so that's the reason why we're working citywide now. Just want to share the future use study will address potential options for how the buildings and sites could be used. The outcomes will guide decisions by the city council and public utility board to help them make a final decision when our outreach process and engagement process is done. And so I do want to emphasize, as a representative for the utility, Tacoma Power is the current manager of the site. And so they are currently using the site for some operations and storage. It's one of the only sites, it's the only site in the city, in this region, that can work on some of our large equipment like cranes and different things that we have to work on. So that happens inside of the Cushman building. If you're not familiar with the sites or where they're located, just wanted to show an image, North 21st Street and North Adams Street. These are the focuses of the study. The study aims to explore the future use of the buildings and the site. So not just the buildings, but also the site. So OTAC, they are our contractors. They couldn't be here tonight, but that's who we're working closely with. And so they're actually leading this study. And this is a variation of the presentation that they shared on Saturday. So if you weren't able to attend the presentations on Saturday, this is just a variation of what they shared, and they will lead the planning, engagement, analysis, architect, urban design, landscape, civil engineering, and other services is what their firm provides. They do work, the things that they're not experts in, they do work with subcontractors. And so as you can see, Leland Consulting Group, which is market economics and real estate experts, and then Rich Haven Architects. Just want to briefly introduce you to the study team. So we have Tacoma Neighborhood Planning, TPU staff. There's a lot of folks just internal, where we're meeting internally, just talking about the study and planning for how to engage and just working with our experts and SMEs. And then we have collaborative support from partner agencies like Tacoma Metro Parks and Tacoma Housing Authority. And then because this is in the 253 region, we have involvement from tribal governments, including or particularly the Puyallup tribe of Indians. And then we have engagement, like I mentioned, is citywide with neighborhood residents, business representatives, special interest groups, boards, and commissions, and just a diverse group of audiences. So last week, or maybe a couple weeks ago now, June 19th, we were at a Juneteenth event. And then that Saturday, we were at the briefly want to discuss some past actions. So the project status. So the Tacoma City Council placed the Cushman and Adams substation on the Tacoma Register of Historic Places in 2017. And then in 2018, a city council resolution directed community engagement efforts for the future redevelopment of these sites. And like I mentioned, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, these efforts were paused in 2020, but have now resumed in really early 2024 with a minor update to the MOU that was signed back in 2018. And the updates to that MOU essentially just included an update to the timeline to reflect the current environment, but no major changes to that MOU. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Tacoma Public Utilities, we're still actively using the buildings and plan to vacate and surplus in 2027. Are happening right now in that building will take place in a new building that is currently in the design phase to be built on the TPU main campus site. Briefly want to just talk about the project timeline and next steps. So mid 2024, we have restarted community engagement and we'll generate different scenarios of the site, where we heard from probably about 70 people, I think, on Saturday, maybe 35 at each session or so. So have some really good feedback so far. We're conducting surveys. And so I think last I checked, there were over 300 survey responses from community. And then 2024, 2025, decision-making about the future use begins. And then permitting and construction of TPU's offsite replacement and maintenance facility will begin early next year. And then 2027 and beyond, Tacoma Power will vacate, and then implementation of recommendations for next steps. And now I'll pass it to Annika to.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Annika Olson. I'm as John mentioned, a senior planner for our neighborhood planning program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the study process and what we're hoping to accomplish during the study, as well as some of the kind of examples that we're using to help inform the process. So John talked a little bit about the timeline, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the steps in the study process. So right now we're in the visioning phase. And as John mentioned, a couple of weekends ago, we had these visioning workshops. Many of you were there. Thank you again for being there and sharing your insight. Those visioning workshops really are about what is the dream for the future of the site. And then we're going to be going this fall into the scenarios workshop, which is really trying to align that dream with some of the feasibility questions about the site in terms of, many, many different factors, including what's there now, environmental conditions at the site, many, many different things, possible partners on the project, those types of things. So, and all of that will sort of help to filter into some specific outputs that will help to recommend action for the city council and the public utility board, who will be those decision makers in the future. John covered most of this, but I did just want to say all of the scenarios that we plan to study will include retaining the both historic buildings. They're both on the historic register. We're not going to look at any scenarios where we remove them. So just wanted to share that as sort of a baseline. And I also just wanted to mention that even once we go through all of that feasibility work, it's still going to be conceptual. Anyone who's ever replaced your deck knows that sometimes there are things that you uncover in the process that, there are snags. So the goal here is really to look at that feasibility and try to get as far along as we can in terms of making the best decision to recommend to council and the pub, but it won't actually be designed still at that point, right? It's still going to be conceptual in terms of decision making, and future study would be needed after the conclusion of this part of the study. I also just wanted to mention some of the constraints that we're working within. So we do have surplus policies at the City of Tacoma that help guide decision making about how surplus properties are used. One of them is a right of first refusal to local tribes. We also, council a few years ago passed a policy to prioritize affordable housing for surplus policies. And then, of course, if there was environmental remediation required, that would, of course, need to be addressed. Also, as I mentioned, thinking about partnership in the future, the city and TPU typically don't operate these types of sites. So who, in the future would be the right operator for a site like this? So those would all be things that will help sort of guide and think about through this study process. One of the great things that the consultant did was they put together some case study examples to just sort of at a very high level help think about what are people around the country doing with great historic sites like this one. So just a few examples I'll talk through. Folks who have been to Wenatchee have maybe been to the Pybus Public Market. That's an adaptively reused project that includes vending spaces that kind of builds on the history as a market. But also creates event space. The Woodinville project here on the left is a historic school building that retained a lot of the site for outdoor public space, and also developed sort of a campus feel with some additional uses on the site, including housing and retail. This is a project in Portland that was more of a food hub that supports local farmers to do distribution in one part of the site, and then the other part of the site is more of an event space. And then there are some kind of substation buildings similar to the one, well, I guess McMenamin's isn't, but a couple of substations on the left. So steam plant in Eugene and then a steam plant in Seattle. The Eugene steam plant is, I think it's event space, a hotel, some restaurant uses, a variety of different uses in that site. The Georgetown steam plant is a really big site that will in the future be used for more kind of STEM or STEAM fittingly. STEAM uses around arts and science. And so that will in the future be more of a campus. So there's a large kind of process going on there now to think about the future of that site. And then of course, we're all familiar with the McMenamin's Elks Temple. And you all know that that's a multi-use space with both the restaurant as well as the hotel use. So I just wanted to sort of give that overview to say, we're not saying that Cushman will be any of these things necessarily, but we just want to sort of open the door at a conceptual level pretty wide so that we can really explore all of those options to come out with the best recommendations in the end. Okay, I already said that. Okay, just a quick recap of the workshops. I know many of you were able to attend those. But for those who weren't, just to go over what we did in the workshop. So we did a visioning images selection exercise. So we had some display boards of different types of uses. We organized those uses by historic building adaptive reuse. So things that could be taking place within historic buildings that are being used for something else. Affordable housing, residential, and mixed use uses, which refers to that surplus policy that I mentioned. So wanting to make sure that we're looking at that in terms of feasibility. And then also community uses and public spaces, which we know is something that's really important to this community and something that we want to make sure that we include and think about in the study. Then folks use dots to sort of vote on their kind of favorite uses. Then we had some discussion at tables, and then people actually went through, this is an example of a display board. And then people actually went through and kind of with a table mat or placemat, that's what it's called, placemat sized piece of paper, folks generated their own vision for the future of the site. And that was a fun exercise. It was not necessarily to scale. Again, it wasn't looking at feasibility. It's just thinking about pie in the sky, dreaming at this phase. What are the uses that folks are wanting to see at that site? Okay, it's not. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so then folks also were able to use Post-its with these different colors to fill out different uses of the site. This is just an example. And here are just a couple of the completed examples. And in later this summer, we're going to do a much deeper dive on the ones that we collected back and summarize those as part of the future use study. Some of the things I wanted to mention just that came up at those workshops are just thinking by category of those 3 categories. So for historic buildings and adaptive reuse, people talked about things like maker spaces, art studios, or learning spaces. People talked about wanting to be able to gather or get information about local history, and then retail options like local food or coffee shops, and then roof access, thinking about views from that site. For the affordable housing, mixed use and residential, people talked about neighborhood scale housing, senior housing. The affordable housing options would be in scale with the surrounding neighborhood and with the historic buildings, wanting to make sure that there's places to gather and play and would have public access, and that also there could be an opportunity to align that with some of the mixed use. And then one of the biggest categories, of course, is community use and public space. So space for kids to play and families, sculptures and art. Dog park was something that came up. Community gardens, and then also one of the big items was the idea of a festival street that could be between the 2 sites. So on North Adams Street, between Adams and Cushman Substation, trying to change that street so that it's more about people and less about cars. That would also create a bigger site overall. And as I said already, I think one of the biggest things we heard is just making sure that the site is accessible to community. There are partnership opportunities, for example, with Metro Parks to think not just about the site, but also about the site perimeter. So those are some of the things, very high level. Again, this is just at the sort of conceptual visioning phase. All of this information is being filtered into the process of looking at scenarios later this summer. As John mentioned, all summer long, we're going to be at events around the city. You can look on the website, you can scan the QR code. And one of the kind of culminating events is that NENC is hosting an event on September 7th at the site. And we'll be able to provide sort of what we've been hearing in the visioning phase. And then that will lead us into some workshops around scenarios that will happen in October. We also have a survey online that John mentioned. We've already had a lot of response, which is great. So please help us continue to get more responses. It really helps us. And just to kind of recap, so study process will continue through early next year. City Council and the pub will get information based on this study, and then they'll provide additional direction about what we do next. And we will need to do more study and design, technical analysis, et cetera, coming out of this study. But this study will set us up really well to understand what is feasible at those sites to be able to be responsive to community desire. So I think that's everything I wanted to say about Cushman. Before I wrap up, I have to just quickly plug my other hat. So for the Proctor Neighborhood Plan, which many folks in this room were very actively involved in as steering group members, which was adopted by council earlier this year, the community voted to spend funds on hosting open streets events in Proctor this summer. And put a lot of flyers on the back table, and I encourage you to grab some and share with your neighbors. These should be really fun. They're family-friendly events, and the Historic Cushman Street Fair is one of those events. So I see a question here. Thanks. Oh, yeah. John, do you want to come?
Perhaps we've got it. Testing.
All right, thank you. So there are a lot of people who feel like they've given a lot of input in the past, and that summary didn't seem to bring in a lot of input that I know people gave in the past. And I'm really hoping that you're not just starting with last week's events. I'd really like to see a summary of what you have heard over the past many, many years of talking about this site, because people are a little bit exhausted. And and one of the things in particular, I know an idea that I had brought forward a long time ago was to turn the Adams building into a transit center, because the North End does not have a transit center and needs one sorely. So I'd like to see that show up in the summary of ideas at future events. So could you just say what's happened with everything that you've heard in the past?
Well, maybe I'll just start and say I'm actually meant to say that we definitely are starting with that past public feedback. So thank you for mentioning that, because I forgot to say that. That is the baseline. This was just a summary of the workshops that we did, and it was not a comprehensive summary. Just some of the new things that I would say emerged from that conversation. So.
And because I'm going to run to a soccer game here in a moment. So I'll just say, please ask them all the questions you can about technical pieces. I would just say that we start getting the philosophy parts and like what it finally ends up becoming, that lands squarely in my bucket here. So they're going to talk about the outreach process and the ideas they're hearing, and they're here to collect your feedback. But when you start getting to like, well, this is what we want, then those land squarely into my lap as the policymaker. So I'll just say that. Number two, I would say, yes, we are listening to all the feedback, the Friends of Cushman Substation, the Historic Cushman Substation Group, all these groups that have provided lots of feedback over time. One thing I was very clear to though say when we had our meeting the other day is there are some parts of our community who have been thinking about building for years and years and years. There are some parts of our community that don't even know that thing exists. And so we do need to try to open the conversation up as much as possible. And so part of this process is balancing what we've heard so far and also trying to bring bring people in to get a really comprehensive perspective of what the future of the building could be. And so please share with them what you've shared. I'm committed to making sure we're getting all these ideas in here. And I think I would just come back to the goal is we're going to get some scenarios that we'll be able to really kind of discuss about what the future is going to look like. And you all can really dig in and weigh in on that. Nothing's set in stone, because we have to do all these feasibility studies. So if it comes to find out the community says this is what we want, like I would caution to say, look at the Galt project as an example, right? The community weighed in, this is what we want, this is what we want to see. Ended up not being feasible. The building sat vacant, caught on fire, and now it's been torn down. So part of this process will be working with all of you to come up with something that's feasible and then studying it to make sure whether it's feasible or not to get towards something that we can actually use the building for. Because it would break my heart, and many of you here, that if we, Tacoma Public Utilities, moved out and it sat vacant for an extended period of time. It's not good for anybody. So I just want to say I got to leave. But if you have questions and you want to talk to me further about policy decisions, I'm the guy. Thank you.
I got a question. How was the OTAC engaged? How were they engaged to, who decided that? And
Unless you, I mean, so I can speak a little bit to that question. Folks can online, I think, can hear because you've got the mic now. Is that right? I forgot about that. Okay. So yeah, so there was a process. They've been very patient, actually, I'll say. So there was a process to bring them on in 2019. And they were selected through a competitive process like we do for all consultants. We had a request for proposals. A lot of different firms applied with very extensive expertise. They came forward with a competitive proposal and a team that has a lot of different expertise on it that's relevant to this project. And then they were selected, they got under contract, I think in 2020. And then we had to put the project on pause, I guess in 2019. Yeah. Yeah, so they've continued to be the consultant for the project. And then they do have sub-consultants that have some additional types of expertise, again, that kind of complement their knowledge around environmental design, planning, civil engineering, some of the things that I think we shared on the slide. So does that answer your question? I don't think either of us have ever worked with them. They're definitely a highly reputable firm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a question. You mentioned just in passing that some entities like the tribes have the first right of refusal. Do any of them have a proposal, and do they have veto power over any of these community engagement programs?
So they haven't sent any proposals to us. I know in 2000, I guess before I started the utility, there was a letter that we're required to send out to tribes when there's a building being surplus in the area. And we did send out a letter to them in like 2017. And there was no engagement. We did send out another letter before we started this engagement process, and they did respond and just, thank for the letter, but there isn't any current formal conversations happening. In regards to the policy question, that is more of a council or Deputy Mayor Hines question, and so I can definitely follow up with you on that.
One addition to that, which is that if a local tribe was interested, the study that we're doing now wouldn't sit on the shelf. We would make sure that it was shared with them quite extensively and that they were really familiar with what the contents of that were.
I have a question about funding. So my understanding is that we have the funding for this visioning process. Is that, I guess my first question is that where the funding ends? Like, is there funding for the feasibility and technical analysis? And then also, are there funding sources for the I know that the funding sources for the actual redevelopment will depend on what the redevelopment is, but I'm wondering if you have ideas for what those funding sources might be depending on what the outcome is, and like whether there are specific deadlines for when that funding, might be, when grants open up, or when it might be politically feasible to put something on a ballot that you're trying to line up and be prepared for.
I'll start just by quickly answering, and then you can speak to STPU as the current, landlord of that building. The short answer is excellent questions, and we look forward to being able to tell you more in early 2025. I think those are all the right questions to be asking, and we don't know the answer to those yet. And that's what the study is designed to help us understand. It's not going to completely answer that question, but some of those questions about, what are sort of level of order of magnitude, there we go, cost that would be associated with some different scenarios. Who would pay for that? Where is funding available? Like, those are all the kinds of questions that the study is really designed to help address. And that's where Deputy Mayor Hines was just talking about feasibility, that piece. So it's a great question. And you may want to speak to some of the, yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess the funding depends on the future use, but I do want to share there are funds that will be allocated whatever the future use is for the environmental cleanup portion, and then also an appraisal on the building. I know those things haven't happened yet, but it's just contingent upon what the future use is, and then depending on that future use, I've just from in some internal conversations with folks who go apply for grants, although Tacoma Power, once we vacate, we're going to have a new facility, so we won't be the ones applying for any grants. I know that there are grants associating things for things just like this. I just don't know what those actually are. I can only speak to, I know that we have funds we're responsible for the environmental cleanup portion, and then also an appraisal. I do want to add, there was a question about OTAC. And so that funding, they've, outside of some of the inflation costs, I think they came on before I started at the utility, but they honored the initial proposal and the fees associated with that. And so those funds were split between the city and Tacoma Power at 50%.
Hi. First of all, that was a great study session that we had on Saturday, and how you guys went about and explained the program and how people were able to provide their input. I do want to say, building off of what Karen was saying, I am the recipient of thousands of the responses from the various outreach efforts that NENC has had regarding the properties and the buildings. And so I'd be happy to turn those all over to you and the zillion Post-its and so on and so forth. But I will make note to everybody that on the second page of the agenda, you'll see a bullet that says Third Historic Cushman Street Fair. There are 2 links there. The first link is actually on our NENC website, and that actually has a wonderful video that's only 6 minutes long that captures all the feedback that's come from farmers markets, from Proctor Fest, from the Historic Cushman. I discovered Historic Cushman, and it goes through and analyzes everybody's responses. One of the major responses we always have is people want to park. And that's one thing that I will point out that I think was lacking in what you guys have as far as a survey right now. Park is never mentioned, and yet it was by way and far the most important thing that people have been asking for over the years. And with that, with the park, I know Metro Parks is involved in doing their strategic planning for 2026 when they're going to be coming forth with a bond. But if we're not tying in and hearing back from the community, they just want a park. It may just be the open space, may just want some trees and benches. That is not something that is easily responded to because it's not a category that you find underneath the survey. So I'm going to ask you guys to reassess that. There's a lot of pictures. There's some combined uses, but for Metro Parks, because it's clear even from their studies, there's not a 10-minute walk for this area of the city to get to a park. And, if you rent on top of one of the expensive apartment buildings, you can be up on a rooftop. But for people who can't afford that and who need open space for all the kind of the mental things that we've been talking about as far as people needing that, I just ask that everybody says, what is this going to look like 20, 50 years from now? There's going to be a lot of apartments, and you can't just have someone sticking their head out of their sliding door and say that's their open space. So ask that that be considered as being actually a category. Thanks.
Of course, I want to share, it's okay, we can clap for that. I saw some applause for that. Yeah. One thing I want to share, Jody, I know we've talked about this, Mr. Burns. I know that you've utilized, I recently had a conversation with one of our past chairs of the Public Utility Board. And he said when he served on the Public Utility Board, he was surprised that there wasn't a ton of engagement from community. So I made a commitment to him this past Saturday. I will share that a lot more, that we do have a Public Utility Board that will work closely with council. So we have Deputy Mayor Hines, but then we also have a Public Utility Board that will love to hear public comment, where there's an opportunity of public comment similar to the Tacoma City Council. And there are 5 people appointed by the mayor to represent community. And so I just want to encourage as spokespeople that take this information back, where we're meeting with leaders and policymakers. I think it's also powerful to hear for the policymakers, not just the council, but the Public Utility Board, to hear from our community. So thank you for that. I just wanted to share that.
Notice in the paper anything about are there still any environmental hazards on site that haven't been budgeted for, perhaps, or not discussed, or has it been thoroughly evaluated even yet?
Yeah, there has been an environmental assessment conducted, and we have done what we needed to do up to the state's standards. But in regards to, and just talking to some of our environmental folks, from my understanding, it wasn't as bad as most folks thought it was, or even our team thought it was. And so that was good news. And so they know that there's going to be a cleanup. They don't know what kind of cleanup, but it's not going to be what they thought, what they expected it to be. So it's not, they met whatever the state requirement was right now, but then they're going to invest more money once we understand more of what the future use will be.
Do you have any notes at all of what hazardous?
There is I think we just, is that the assessment?
Asbestos.
We haven't posted we will post the assessment and those results at the end of July. And so I will also, I'll email that to you, Peter, as well, once I have access to that.
Sorry, one more question from me. I'm curious how the decision making will work, since it sounds like there's two bodies that are making the decision. Is it like every person on those bodies gets a vote, and then yeah, how does the decision making work?
Yeah, so I believe that it goes to the Public Utility Board first, and then it will go to Tacoma City Council, how we've presented internally. Typically, there's a presentation to the pub and to the council, and then they have their joint study sessions. And so even as we prepared to engage in our engagement process, we've had the process where we go to the pub, then the city council, and then they typically have their joint study sessions. So I imagine the decision-making process will be similar to that. And I can follow up on that question as well. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's what we've talked about up to this point is really, yeah, that the pub will review it first, then city council, and then they'll make recommended actions. And some of those actions might be things like additional feasibility or technical analysis that is needed, that we uncover in this process, where it's like, we actually need to know a little more about this before we can make a final decision that's going to be viable and feasible. So that may be, they will make decisions. They are the decision makers. And in terms of exactly what decisions we will be asking them to make in Q2 of 2025, I think we don't exactly know yet. And I'm like a broken record, but the study is going to help us to identify that process and figure that out.
One more question.
But a comment, I really appreciated being on the previous experience or taking part in it at the Wheelock Library, I believe. And it was very informative. And thank you for having that opportunity for us. Thank you.
And taking that as the lead in, can we give a round of applause to John and Annika and I'm assuming you'll be back in November for the summary update, and obviously pardon?
We'll have our consultant with us.
Yes, and there is a report posted about this, which I guess is being updated, but we'll post those on our site. We also, the survey that you've mentioned, there should be a live link on the agenda. So if you look at the electronic agenda and you haven't done the survey, you should be able to hit the link and it will go into the survey. And I think you heard Jody's suggestion. If you're doing that survey, it doesn't talk about parks. You may have to actually physically write that into the comments. Anyway, thank you very much. And we love having you. And back on the agenda, back on old business, I think you're all familiar that Tacoma used to go. The NENC is very involved in monitoring that and commenting off as The Amici House, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, planning department did come out with a ruling on that last week. We've had a couple of reach out to us to ask where we are on that. We have a board-only meeting next Monday, and we'll be discussing that issue. But decision that came out does give approval to that conversion with certain restrictions. The major restriction that I saw in reading it through was it asked for 51 people in that area. Now, approval is for they explain how they get size. The board will be discussing that, but we need your input. So if you've got those of you, especially who are neighbors to that area, you've got thoughts and desires and you want us to take a position, please reach out to us and have a question. Do we need a microphone?
Thank you. The way I read the decision, it was there was quite the preamble about what is a conditional use permit. And it essentially said, we make the decision, don't talk to your council member about this. This is the decision, it's final. I'm not sure. I mean, it'll be interesting to see when you read that and talk about it. It doesn't seem like there's any next steps involved. I mean, but they really don't want us to talk to, that they basically said it's planning department decision. It's not, the council is not involved. So. Have this one.
Let's try again. So to just repeat to the people on Zoom, I'm no expert, but we will be discussing it, and we assume that there will be some need to reach out to either make some suggestions or whatever. So we need input from the membership on that. Anything else on that issue? The Historic District moratorium, sorry, that was challenged by Historic Tacoma, who reached out to asked us if we wanted to be part of that challenge. The board discussed that, took a vote, and we did decide to join that challenge. So we are actually joining in a legal challenge to the moratorium on historic districts. And again, we will be posting as that information. We've been getting, there is an attorney hired who's doing that. They're not charging us because we're sort of a free rider. But I know that there's going to be a Zoom meeting coming up, I think on the 11th, and we are getting regular reports on the status of that. The last old item I have is the rendering plan. I keep in contact with the Port of Tacoma, and they have promised me that if that gets onto the agenda for the Port Commission to make a decision, they will give us advance notice so that we have the ability to comment, attend the meeting, do whatever needs to be done on that. So those are all the items in old business. Is there any new business items? Yes. I think you've still got the microphone, have you? Oh.
So I hope we'll have some conversations about what's going to happen in the bank building. The gentleman that was talking earlier about what's proposed at the Madison Middle School ground, Rush in doing Proctor Flats got all kinds of bonus this, bonus that because of amenities that that building was supposed to provide, including a commercial space that would be open to the public. That is not there. So much caution working with Rush and getting the planning department to oversee that what it's built is actually what is promised to the community when they get those structures imposed on them. So so I don't know when so you had mentioned, I don't remember who mentioned that Rush is doing another Proctor thing.
Correct. And that was sort of, again, I had heard that that had happened. I was trying to reach out to our council members to say, don't just sort of sit there and wait for somebody to come in with a development for a new thing. And then normally whoever is first out of the block with a suggestion, they're making the agenda. So in my opinion, this is a time for our council members to be making the agenda by saying, there is a concern in Proctor about these buildings that are going up, and there's a desire from the rest of the city to have more of these buildings. So let's try and get some thought process on it. But that's personal. We haven't discussed it as a board yet.
Right. And they certainly should not be continuing to get tax write-offs when they're not paying for the costs of their development that the ratepayers are paying for. So I am a residential representative on the other utilities commission for the city, the utilities commission for sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. And those utilities are also going through their budget setting activities right now. Some interesting things that popped out to me is there is an across the board 10% increase in staff costs, which seems to me to be a little on the high side. They are talking about having utility ratepayers fund somebody that sits in the planning department and does utility oriented review of permits. I think that should be covered by permit fees, not by ratepayers. And overall, there is not much in their plan that does much more than maintain current assets. There's not really improvements to water quality. There's not additional services like we got from Tidy Up Tacoma. And I would like to just, I'm going to sit around for a little while after the meeting's over. If anybody wants to talk to me about their feelings about those utility rates and services, I can bring your concerns to those staff.
Thank you, Karen. Some of your emails were shared with the board before this meeting, so perhaps those could be distilled into like a position paper, and we could share that with the membership. I thought that there were some very interesting points that you raised, so we're interested in supporting you and being involved in that issue as well.
Okay, I'm trying to keep you informed so that you can tell me whether I'm on the right track in representing you.
Okay. And we have one more question. Want to grab the microphone so we share it?
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking as I was sitting here, based on what you were talking about, that it might be a real great program to have the planning department come through and explain to us this checklist for the things that Rush was supposed to do and show us how those have been accomplished or why they haven't been. That might be a good thing to invite the planning commission, not to, skewer them or anything, but like, hey, we'd like to know, explain this to us. Because I've heard that, they've got all these benefits. It's actually part of the discussion on home in Tacoma too. And they're going to have all these benefits and bonuses. So let's understand that a little bit better. So I just throw that out for the council to consider that.
So again, we'll address that at the next board meeting because we do try and project out our meeting agendas so that we get that. So I'm not quite, I know we've got home in Tacoma on the agenda, I think for November or December, but whether we need to get it on before that, we'll look at that. And another question over here.
Hi, yeah, it's a little loud. I just had some feedback about ClickFix 311 Tacoma. Am I saying the name right? Thank you. Confusing name. My feedback is though that it's great. I had a car that was parked forever and had an abandoned vehicle post and they came right away, fixed it, took care of it. How long has that been in place? How about Tacoma?
So I think the comment, and I hope Christina is at least listening. So the city sort of is often a little light on getting compliments. So you got a compliment on the click
Gotta
fix.
encourage the things that you like. So it was a
So-
great experience, worked really well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And once you've gone on, you will now be getting umpteen messages every day. And they seem to do wonderfully well on things like potholes. Some of the other areas, they struggle a little bit more. But that is on one of our, I work with Christina on actually getting a speaker to come and address that whole process. So that's one of the ones we're going to try and put into the agenda, is to have the people who coordinate that come in and talk about how the process works. But again, I'm sure Christina's happy to have a compliment. Do you want we maybe would hear you, Christina.
Yes, if you can hear, I'll
Yes,
just
we
make
can hear you.
one quick comment. First of all, thank you so much for providing that feedback. That is really helpful to hear when our 311 system is working well for people. But I also just wanted to stress that Tacoma is very much a data-driven city. So entering items into 311 is extremely important for us because it helps us understand where to put resources and where to focus when dealing with a range of issues, whether it's litter, graffiti, people experiencing homelessness. So we really appreciate when the community helps to input things into 311. And yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
And if there are no other new items of business, I just need to put a plug in for next month's meeting, which is on August the 5th, where Tree Canopy seems to be our summer project. And we have Tacoma Tree Foundation, the City of Tacoma's Urban Forestry Department, and the Forest Health Watch all speaking to us together on Tree Canopy. And I think we're going to be also addressing what NENC can or should be doing with respect to supporting increasing the tree canopy. So if I have no other comments, I'll adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing all of you next month. Thank you very much.